panelists, Dr. Sharif with me, and we'll see who else joins us as well. But a lot's going on in the world, and always glad to be talking about that here on Pod TV, hearing people's reactions to the various news stories that are taking place and how it is impacting their lives and all in that way. Two men were stabbed in a suspected anti-Semitic attack in North London. So, the UK is investigating attacks on Jewish targets for possible links to Iran. The Free Press reported, "I supported Keir Starmer, but he's failing the Britain Jews," and that's what one of the headlines said, and all along those lines. So definitely that is something being reported out of the UK. UK government is pledging $34 million to fight anti-Semitism as London stabbing victim mom recalls horror of attack. So that's something that folks are talking about as well. And Israel intercepts a Gaza flotilla near Crete and detains 175 activists. Activists say Israel intercepts part of Gaza aid flotilla off the Greek coast, and they've detained the crew as well as others as on that particular trip. So Israeli forces raid the global Samad flotilla boats in the international waters. So that's something going on in the whole Middle Eastern conflict. And mirroring Gaza, Israel is destroying towns and villages in southern Lebanon. Civilians or Hezbollah? Who did Israel hit on Lebanon's Black Wednesday is what Al Jazeera is asking. So Israel strike kills 5 in South Lebanon, including 3 rescuers. IDF chief says there's no ceasefire in South Lebanon amid the continued fighting with Hezbollah. And who are Hashab al-Yaman, the group claiming the Golders Green attack, so attack on Jewish targets in Europe, suggests hybrid warfare. So German intelligence warns of rising Iran-linked terror threat, and that's definitely something that folks are talking about as well. And Trump promised nomination as some 287 are on the Nobel Peace Prize list for 2026. So some 287 have been nominated for the 2026 Nobel Peace Prize. Trump is likely among them. Norwegian Nobel Institute receives 287 Peace Prize nominations. And we'll see if he actually gets that Nobel Peace Prize that he wants, and all along those lines. And a historic breakthrough, Columbia climate talks end with hopes raised for things to change in the way of fossil fuels. So in the midst of an energy crisis, countries are making plans to ditch oil, gas, and coal. So countries in Columbia Fossil Fuel Summit with a focus on next steps and financing. So nations meet to discuss fossil fuel exit as Iran war is driving up the prices. And whale carried by barge out of German waters after weeks stranded on coast. So a barge carrying Timmy the humpback whale journeys to the North Sea, and attempts to rescue Timmy the stranded whale are inadvisable, experts had said, and everything like that. But it looks like the whale Timmy reaches Denmark in rescue efforts, and that's a good news for that particular whale. Most Swiss back initiative to cap population at 10 million, poll shows. So Switzerland is weighing a 10 million population cap. What to know about Switzerland's proposal to cap its population and all along those lines. So it'll be interesting to see, and other countries may go in this route as well. Press freedom is as lowest level in 25 years is what the RSF says. So press freedom worldwide falls to its lowest level in 25 years. So definitely it looks like those of us in the press are having a hard time with various governments and all along those lines. Search for missing girl in Australia ends in worst possible outcome. Jefferson Lewis was arrested over the death of Kaman little baby in Northern Territory. Police say they believe the abducted 5-year-old girl was murdered as the body was found. So definitely that's something that folks are talking about as well. And in environmental disaster, fears grip Russia as Ukraine targets oil refineries. So another Russian oil facility burns as Zelensky touts Ukraine's drone reach. So that's definitely something that folks are talking about also. So there's definitely conversation about that. And Jason Smith slams hospital CEOs for the affordability crisis. Hospital CEOs are defending charging patients more at facilities, and the GOP takes aim at hospital CEOs over the affordability crisis. So the New York hospital head explains rising costs to Congress and blames basically everything. So it looks like there's definitely a lot of people that are talking about the rising costs of a lot of things, including the rising costs of what's going on in the sense of the cost of items like bread and gas, but also hospital care as well. So definitely a lot's going on in that space, and a lot is conversations around that. Governor Janet Mills drops Maine Senate bid week before primary clash. So this is going to be setting up a race between Plattner and Collins. So Mills drops out of Maine Senate race, setting up Plattner to face Collins. So it looks like the Maine governor has dropped out of the race to unseat the Democratic Senator Susan Collins. And Defense Secretary Pete Hedges testifies on Iran war. So that's definitely something that people are looking about. Al Jazeera is talking about 25 billion or 1 trillion. How much has the Iran war really cost the U.S.? So definitely that's something that folks are talking about. And there's also been an article about repairing damaged U.S. military bases will add billions to the Iran war cost, is what some sources are saying. And Alex Patella says Democrats should do something about the Voting Rights Act ruling. So definitely there's some conversations about the Voting Rights Act as well. And London police released the body cam of the arrest after 2 Jewish men were stabbed, and all along those lines. So that's some of the news for today. I'm going to bring in my fellow panelists, see what they've got on their mind. And today it's Rick. I know I had Sharif with me earlier, and all along those lines. Appreciate you helping yesterday. I had to interview a potential job boss and everything like that. So I had to be cutting and running and all in that space. But I did go back and watch, and you did a great job with the Reverend and everything like that. So I do appreciate you on that note.
Yeah, that was fun. I'm looking at an article off of Drudge, which is where I always go for my stuff. Almost 9 in 10 Americans think the country is in an affordability crisis.
Right.
National average gas, $4.30 a gallon.
Oh, wow.
Which is higher than 93.8% of the time that Biden was president. There were only 13 weeks during Biden's 4 years where gas was more expensive than it is right now. And tomorrow marks May 1st, where the country nationally moves into more expensive summer weight gas, which is lighter, less polluting.
Yeah, and I know that apparently that conference that the U.S. did not participate in is saying that they're trying to get away from fossil fuels and everything like that. And I guess they're trying to figure out these various countries how they're going to do that. So there's a bunch of countries that are trying to get us out of coal and gas and a number of the fossil fuels. So we'll see if they are successful in that effort or not. And you'll probably hear when I mentioned the story about the hospital and the rising costs of medicine. And I know we've got the medicine show here on the network, but yeah, it seems like the costs are continually going up, even if you have something what used to be considered a simple procedure. And
medicine keeps getting better, but it also keeps getting more expensive. And also, we haven't squeezed out the administrative and costs and the costs of paying insurers.
Yeah, we definitely haven't done that and everything like that. I had mentioned the voting rights story, but I didn't really get into it. But it looks like the Supreme Court narrows voting rights acts in Louisiana redistricting case. So following the Supreme Court decision, Louisiana Republicans are weighing canceling the U.S. House primary election. So they're doing that, and the state is rushing to redraw congressional districts to gut Black voting power in that particular state.
So the trend has been for the past 10 years or so, where the conservatives on the Supreme Court, led by John Roberts, say that the Voting Rights Act was from 1965 or so,
something like that.
And it said that conditions for Black voters across the southeastern states and some other places were unfair, and that laws needed to protect the rights of Black voters across the South. And Roberts has been saying for a long time, no, everything's fine, everything's fixed. Obviously, not everything is fixed. Louisiana, I think, has 2 districts that are Black majority, and the Republicans in Louisiana want to redraw the lines to cram, a bunch of Black people into just one, so they get one representative, and then the rest of the state goes to Republicans.
Right, they're definitely trying to do that.
this can backfire.
Right.
Now, if the Republicans become sufficiently loathed by voters in the midterms, if you take a state and redraw the districts so you have one Democratic district where it's 80% Dems, and then you draw the rest of the state where each district is 55% Republican, which is a safe margin in a normal election, and you've squeezed all your voters, your Democratic voters, into one place. If you don't gerrymander yourself enough of a margin, it can backfire on you, and a voter backlash can end up swamping some of these supposedly safe Republican seats.
Yeah, that could be an issue. By the way, Louisiana was in the news as well because apparently the Orleans Parish Sheriff, Susan Hudson, who is a sister, it was indicted on 30 counts. So apparently she's been indicted after investigation into the escape of 10 inmates. And this was after a toilet jailbreak let 10 inmates escape in a lockup fiasco. So some people are asking who is Bianca Brown, and that's the other person that was indicted along with Sheriff Hudson and everything like that. But it looks like that could be some other bad news coming out of New Orleans and everything like that. But yeah, I'm not that familiar with the toilet breakthrough, but I do know that sometimes they'll find any way that they can get get out of
Shawshank Redemption.
Right.
That's how he got out. So Louisiana, when people think of Louisiana, they think of fun, they think of New Orleans, they maybe think of Hurricane Katrina, they think of great food, great drinks, but Louisiana is among the worst states in the country for inept and corrupt government.
Yeah, they've had a big history of that and everything. It looks like the Coast Guard is saying that they're operating in crisis as the DHS shutdown halts pay in May, cuts power, and it looks like there's a lot of other things that are going on. So they're saying utility shutoffs, mounting debt. Coast Guard is enduring hardships in an ongoing shutdown. So I know it was impacting the airline and the TSA, but it looks like it's impacting the Coast Guards as well. So everything like that. And I did see, as I mentioned, that Pete Hegseth has testified, and there's this notion that maybe the war's only costing $25 billion, but it looks like
that's bullshit. That is bullshit. It's costing at least $1 billion a day, and I would guess that it's closer to 1.5 or 2 billion a day. I think we're coming up on day 60 of the war. I bet you it's cost us $100 billion so far in direct cost, and then the indirect costs with rising prices. That adds another couple $100 billion. Oh
yeah, that actually adds that big time. I saw that Trump is weighing pulling the U.S. troop from Germany amid his clash with the chancellor over the Iran war. So, he's always got this attitude about different people that are going against him. So right now, his latest thing is like he wants to pull out of NATO. Apparently, he also wants to pull. And I know that's actually one of our, for lack of a better term, popular bases, because I do know that a lot of people serve time in Germany and everything along those lines, but it looks like he's talking about pulling the troops out of Germany and all in that space. But that would be
before World War I and World War II, the U.S. was, economically strong, but it wasn't a world powerhouse.
Right.
Our involvement, especially in World War II, made the U.S. the dominant economic and manufacturing power in the world. And Trump is taking us back to 120 years ago when the U.S. was like a smaller, more regional power. The U.S. has 800 military bases on foreign soil, and that's great for the U.S. We have cooperation with the rest of the world, and Trump is saying "F you" to the world, and that's fine if you want to shrink the U.S. back down to an also-ran, formerly great country.
Yeah, he said he wants to make America great, but like you said, maybe he's trying to make it formerly great and everything like that, because I know he's definitely...
I mean, there are plenty of nice countries that used to rule the world, like England, Great Britain. They said that the sun never set on the British Empire.
Right.
And then stuff happened to Britain, and they don't own the world anymore. Britain's still a nice place to visit. I like going. Our kids in London. I love visiting her there. It's a great city. But England is no longer, the world powerhouse. Spain, centuries ago, ran the world. The Roman Empire, all these places, Spain, Italy, all great places to visit with great histories and heritage, but no longer as important in the world as they were centuries ago. And the U.S. is getting dismantled in a similar frickin' way to make way for China. Can we ever, can we stop China from becoming the world's dominant power? I don't know. But under Trump, we lose ground at a faster rate than we should.
Yeah, we're definitely losing ground and everything like that. One of our people that is connected to North Carolina apparently isn't done with Trump nominees, because apparently he's saying that take him at his word, that being Thom Tillis. I know that even Kim has praised some of the things that Thom Tillis has done, but not all of them. But apparently he's trying to block Trump's AG nominee. And definitely there are other nominations that he might be fighting as well. So he's opening up a new front in his war against Trump nominees and everything like that. So I'll be interested to see how this plays, and maybe gets on Trump's target list and everything like that. I did see your former boss Kimmel was in the news. So Brendan Carr's fight with Disney revives a GOP fissures, and Kimmel's message to Trump in wake of FCC challenge to ABC. The show goes on. So Trump says ABC should fire talk show host Kimmel soon. So he said that
it's weird where Jimmy Kimmel is now kind of a freedom fighter, where right. Jimmy Kimmel just wants to do his show. I mean, Kimmel is various late night hosts had different attitudes about their job. Leno loved the joke part at the top of the show, doing the monologue. Wasn't great with interviews. Craig Kilborn, who had the Daily Show and then had a talk show. He was a guy who just liked to show up at noon, read the jokes people had written for him, and then get out of there. Kimmel is a guy who has had a lifelong love of the late night his high school license plates on his car said late night, not because he ever intended to become a late night host, but it's because he loved Letterman. Right. And he loves everything about his job, which is, he gets to mess with people, do pranks. He gets to talk with people, have lively conversations, and he's just a guy who likes having fun with people, especially lunatics. I was one of the lunatics he hired. He liked having a crew of people who were both talented and a little crazy. And the idea that this guy, a wildly smart guy who doesn't always show it because he's a regular guy, is in a position where he is leading the forces, thumbing their nose at a ridiculous dictatorial government, is a crazy position for, I'm sure, he probably laughs at his situation as much as he's pissed off at it.
Yeah, I'm sure he laughs at it to some degree, and people are getting picked up regularly by ICE, even when they're doing the regular thing. So there was an article saying that there was a group of folks, they left for the school bus. ICE picked them up instead. So immigration attorneys and lawmakers are weighing in after Hancock High brothers were detained by ICE. And this was, it looks like, in Mississippi. So ICE takes two teenage exchange students into custody outside their Mississippi host home, and apparently they were just going to go to school because they were exchange students.
If they're exchange students, they're students who come over for 9 months to see what it's like to go to school in America. Yeah, that's some bullshit. So, and also some bullshit that probably makes Kimmel laugh. They're trying to change the name of ICE to NICE, adding national in front of the name. So, that's Trump right there going, we'll make them call it NICE. And it's like, just, we've got a ridiculous government right now.
Well, speaking of ridiculous government, apparently the Iran supreme leader is vowing to protect nuclear and missile capability. So that's part of the things that they want to get rid of is their nuclear capability.
Well, we had a deal. We had a deal under Obama that worked reasonably well. Republicans always railed against the deal, saying it wasn't stopping Iran, but it let inspectors from international nuclear organizations go into Iran and poke around and see exactly what they were doing with their uranium. So the deal is that you enrich uranium, that is, you separate the exploded uranium from the non-exploded uranium up to certain percentages. And it's called enriched uranium, where you spin it around. The exploded uranium is 1% lighter. So you turn it into dust, you stick it in a centrifuge, and the lighter stuff goes to one side, the heavier, and you take the lighter stuff. And when you get to 60% enriched, you can make fuel rods for nuclear reactors out of that stuff, but you can't make nuclear bombs. So you have to enrich it up to 90% exploding before you can make bombs. So the inspectors, under the deal that Obama negotiated, had to go in and look at Iran's uranium to make sure they weren't enriching it past 60%. And that system worked pretty well. And then just Trump got rid of it because he hated Obama. And now we're in a system where there is no freaking system, and Iran is increasingly belligerent and swearing to develop nuclear weapons. Like 10 years ago, the leadership of Iran, and they may have been bullshitting, but they said that nuclear weapons are haram, which is they're not kosher under Muslim. They decided that weapons of that amount of destructive power were not consistent with their religion. Now they could have been, they could have been bullshit, but
they could have been bullshit and everything like that. I did have a question. I got a question for you that I've got to try to find in a little bit and everything like that. But I know you're part of the royal family, Nick, and I saw that they have been in town. Some of the royals from London, and they're now heading back home. So there's Trump hosted King Charles III and Queen Camilla for a formal farewell, and they laid the flowers at the 9/11 memorial in New York. So he's bidding farewell to them after a star-studded gala. So what is your thoughts about the King of England visiting this area and everything like that? And I was wondering, does Spain have a cap on its population? Because I did mention that I think it was Switzerland is thinking about putting a cap on their population, that they don't want a certain amount of people, even though they've got a big country and everything like that. So I think they're going to put a cap on how many what their population can be. Now, whether this means that they ship people out or they kill people, I don't know how they do this cap and everything like that, but they are going to put apparently a population cap. So does Spain have a population cap? And what do you think of this royal travel?
Spain does not have a population cap. Spain also has a king. So right. The thing is, it's a constitutional monarchy similar to Great Britain, but you don't hear about them because you hear only about Great Britain because the relationship with the U.S. and Great Britain is so strong that you don't hear about the King of Spain. There's no population cap.
Okay, well, they're talking about a 10 million population cap in Switzerland, so that's what they're weighing is capping it at 10 million.
Yeah, they're always thinking about it. But in terms of Iran, actually yesterday I was in a cab with an Iranian. Okay. He was the cab driver. He was from Iran, but he spent 50 years in Vienna. He fled Iran.
Right.
And he said, not only me, but about 5 to 6 million other Iranians, because the regime there is so oppressive to these people. So the key question is, as they say, Mr. Wonderful in Shark Tank, what are you going to do? Now, my recommendation is real simple. You take out about 140,000 of them and then force them to surrender. Go according to the books I have here, battles around the world, and that's what you do. It's going to be bloody, brutal, but you'll have regime change. The civil war in Spain actually took out over 500,000 people. That was prior to World War I.
Mhm.
So
No,
unfortunately,
wait, no. The Civil War was prior to World War II, and it left Franco.
Yeah, right. I'm sorry. Prior to World War II. You're right.
But it left
It
a
was-
dictator in power for the next 40 years.
Yeah, then they had Francisco Franco in afterwards. So prior to World War II, and they didn't enter World War II. And I think it's because they had enough blood, guts, and story. But here's what you have a problem. You have a minority, actually, of lunatics who are running Iran. And like I said, 80% of the people do not agree with their current government. But they can't because they have all the weapons, they have all the control of the military, they have control of the police. They basically have total control over the other 80% that are just basically trying to survive. So the question is the United States, if you want to be great again, you got to do what great powers do. And that is to spread blood and mayhem to affect your way. Or what you do is you pack your bags and get the heck out, you know. But this I'm not sure what I'm going to do is a waste of everybody's time. And frankly, if you ask me, what is Trump going to do? I don't have a clue because I don't think he has a clue either. I believe
okay, so the Republican Guard has about 150,000 people. They've got all the guns. They're in all the cities and towns where if you go out on the street and protest, they're the ones who will shoot you. And you know, so the human cost of this, of taking them out, is we know from Gaza that to kill 150,000 Republican guards, you're also going to be killing another 150,000 civilians, men, women, children, because they're embedded in the general population. And that's just Iranians. So you're killing hundreds of thousands of Iranians, and you're probably losing 20,000 American troops because they're the ones who are going in there.
Yeah. Now the choice, that's choice number A. Choice number B is to keep 70 million people enslaved. What do you want to do?
93 million.
And that's the total population. Remember, 20 million.
All right, 20 million are okay with the regime.
They're okay with the regime. In other words, so I'm going to say that's the reason I said it was 70 million because 20 million say, hey, I can live with it. You know, I like the regime. You know, we support it. Okay, so the real question is, would you keep 70 million enslaved for the next, I don't know, 40 years, 50 years, 100 years? Or do you want to take out 150,000 people? What do you want to do? You know, people have choices. You can make those choices, and that's what I see. That's the choices. I mean, you know, it's a hard choice to make, or it could be real easy. It could be harder down the road.
But why is it our job to do that? Now we've taken them on.
That's a good question. You know, that's a good question, Rick. I don't think it was our job to interfere in World War II either. You know, we should have stayed isolated. I mean, these are all philosophical questions. Is it, you know, our job? Should America have entered World War II? How many Americans did we lose? 300,000 in World War II?
410,000.
Yeah, right. So the thing is, you can make a case that we shouldn't have. We should let Hitler do what he wants to do, and leave the whole thing alone. I mean, these are people's individual and group choices. So
well, then another question is, why are we going into Iran and we're leaving North Korea 30, 40 million people enslaved too?
Yeah, that's also a good question. Okay, because you know, also what I think he's looking at Iran is because the Iranian government has lost support. Where in North Korea, I believe they do have support, but I don't know. You know,
we don't know what kind of support we got, and even in the case of Iran, I mean, there is the notion that if you upend this repressive regime, what's the promise that you're going to get a better one? I mean, a lot of people, you're talking about this person. I've met a couple of folks that are Iranian as well, and everything like that. And a lot of times they're driving cabs and doing other things in that realm and everything like that. But they also are people that escaped the Shah because they didn't like the Shah. So they didn't like the past of the government.
All right. But, you know, that was a question in World War II. We got rid of Hitler. What assures us that Hitler, too, doesn't show up? Well, guess what? He didn't.
Yeah. The Shah wasn't doing a good job of governing. He was distracted. He was dying of cancer. He had a pretty corrupt regime that wasn't paying, that didn't address the disgruntled population.
Yeah, definitely did not have that going on. Just a slight aside, and we can get back to the serious issue.
Well, also they had secret police, Savant, that would disappear you. But I'm sure if you offered people the choice, that if they could just snap their fingers and replace, the current regime with the Shah, a majority would do that.
Yeah, majority would probably go back to the Shah, even though the Shah had his own issues, including health issues and everything like that. Just a aside, and this is not a serious news story and everything like that, but as I said, and I do appreciate you yesterday, but when I was talking to this potential job candidate, they were actually from your neck of the woods, Rick, and everything like that, because they actually attended, and I think you attended this university too, because I actually showed them your picture. But one of the universities that they went to was the University of Denver, so they went to the University of Denver.
Well, that's
I went to the University of Denver.
I went to the University of Boulder, which is 30 miles away.
Okay.
But, Nick
who went to DU, Mark?
It was the gentleman that's looking at a potential job with us at Haytime named Michael P. Carson, and everything like that.
Right.
We've done a lot of work in Virginia, Tennessee, different other places around the country. But yeah, he went to the University of Denver. He also went to he also went to Stanford and Harvard University's Kennedy School of Government. He did a lot of work around African nations and some of the things in that space. So he's definitely done a lot of work with organizations, including Africare.
Yeah. DU is not a big school at all. Colorado is huge.
Right.
It's a Boulder, but DU is a small private school downtown. It's near the tech center.
Okay.
Of Denver, but it's certainly not that big. I went there because I had a graduate tax program. That's where I got my LLM from, was DU, but that's like 1982 or 83. Long time ago.
Would you get
around that same time frame, because he's in his about my age, in his early 60s and everything like that. So he's probably.
If you were going to school right now, would you get that same degree or not? Because our tax system is like kind of broken compared to when you went to school.
Yeah, well, the JD stands for it just depends.
Depends.
The real problem is in the United States, you have so many lawyers. It's so competitive. There's what 1.3 million.
Yeah, there's y'all have way too many attorneys and everything like that, and all on those lines. By the way, we have a new show because she was on the show that Rick was on, and I've been talking to her, and she's going to start a show with us in June on I think we said Wednesdays afternoons around noon and everything like that, but it's going to be called Medicaid Moments. So the lady that is very much about kind of like Irene is with getting people out of the timeshare fraud business, Tony King is wanting to get more and more people aware of what's going on with Medicare and Medicare fraud, and making sure that
Medicare or Medicaid, because they kind of run.
Well, I mean, that's one of the issues. People don't know that it's a very complicated system.
Right.
And I'm lucky that my wife has educated. I'm the one who's on Medicare. I hit 65 last year, but my wife is the one who's done all the work, all the homework, all the calling to figure it out, and to also, like, when you switch primary insurance providers, and I switched from Blue Cross as part of Writers Guild to Medicare being the primary. If you don't tell all your doctors, and when you get to be my age, you've got quite a few doctors, if you don't tell all of them that your primary has changed, you will start getting big ass medical bills. And then you have to get on the phone and wait on hold for an hour every freaking time.
Yeah,
not only that, but you have people that call in.
IRMA, if you have a large income, a lot of people aren't even familiar with IRMA, but large income people actually pay a Medicare surcharge. Some cases $600-700 a month. But I'm not crying for them, because you have to have an income over $212,000. But here's what people are crying for right now, and I know Toby is weeping like crazy. In Seattle,
by the way, the show will be called Medicare Moment, so it is Medicare that Tony will be bringing us.
A Medicare Moment, and Medicare is big. 10,000 people a day turn age 65 in the U.S. But here's where people are weeping, and they even have a place where you can donate to them. Okay. In Seattle, they're creating a millionaire's tax. And so what's happening, there's a citizens defense fund, if everybody here wants to donate, to stop millionaires from being taxed. Isn't that a worthy cause for your donations? Is to stop millionaires. Millionaires shouldn't have to pay taxes or additional taxes, right, guys? Yeah, no, look it up.
They pay some taxes. Okay, so that's similar to what's going on in California.
Yeah,
where
you guys actually have a referendum to put it on the ballot.
We're going to vote to tax billionaires a one-time wealth tax of 5%. There are about 200 people in California who are worth more than 1.1 billion, and the people behind the referendum want to tax each of those people 5% of their money, which is that's 55 million bucks if you're worth 1.1 billion.
And should we be crying for them? Should we set up a fund to defend them? What are your thoughts? Should we?
No, and also they're going to do what they're going to buy a house for $8 million in Reno, Nevada, and they're going to just across the border, and they're going to say, well, that's where I live. And yeah, maybe they'll live there 10 days a year, but that'll become their legal residence.
They'll have to live there 183 days a year. I used to work, part of my job, now this goes back almost 40 years, Rick, was re-domiciling people in Florida from New York and New Jersey so they didn't have to pay taxes in New York and New Jersey. And because Florida had no income tax, by the way of the Constitution. So I used to do that all the time. And what they would do is they would buy mansions in Naples or in Boca or in Palm Beach off of the tax savings because they didn't have to pay New York taxes. So and they spent half their time in Florida and half their time in New York. So what'll happen is they'll buy mansions in some other state, maybe Nevada, and then spend half their time there and half their time in their beloved California. And the way they look at it is I use my California tax savings to buy my other mansion. Okay.
See what you're saying,
Rick, do it, but this is not the solution. Unfortunately, you need a federal tax, and we had one. It was a federal estate tax. And unfortunately, they got rid of it in 2010, which is the reason I'm a pension attorney, not a estate planning attorney.
Yeah, you're a pension attorney and not a state.
17 years was high net worth individuals that had to face this onerous estate tax.
I wish Sasha was here because I got a question for both of you, but maybe y'all have an idea and all along those lines, because it seems to me that just like the U.S. is busy, isn't Russia too busy to be interfering in other countries? But apparently the Mali, which is a country in Africa, junta asked Russia to bring order, and militants just stormed in. So Russian paramilitary carried out airstrikes in Mali as rebels advanced. So I thought they were too busy with the war in Ukraine, but apparently
I thought they were too. We'll have to talk to Sasha about it because that's weird because Russia, I mean, I get such conflicting reports on Russia. One day I hear they're going broke. The other day I hear they're doing okay. Who knows what's going on there?
Well, they've been doing okay for the past 5 weeks because the Strait of Hormuz thing has increased the price of oil, and Russia's currently making bank selling oil.
Well, they're banking on the oil that's being transported through the Black Sea or through the North Sea, whatever. Okay, so that's good.
Yeah, we'll have to see if Sasha pops in either today or tomorrow and ask him about that. But that just caught me off guard and everything like that. But, we have a show on the media, and I know that Jacoby's a big fan, as is you and Rick, of media and everything. But apparently there is a new report, and I mentioned it earlier, that says press freedom is in its lowest decline in 25 years. So it's like, and that's with press freedom in decline in 100 out of 180 countries. So they're saying that it's fallen to its lowest level in 25 years. So I'm a member of the press, and I just hear, but just in general. But I was just wondering y'all's thoughts, because this watchdog group is saying that a lot of the world leaders really don't care for the press. They're actually killing a lot of journalists and doing other horrible things. So just what is y'all's take on press freedom?
Well, it's the weaponization of the Department of Justice. It started with the Democrats, and now it's expanded through the Republicans. They get a hold of the Department of Justice. Now you think about it. The Department of Justice really needs to be independent, similar to the Supreme Court. So you get away from this weaponization. And there has to be a conversation about it, Mark, because it is brutal. I mean, what they're doing, it's almost like a Gestapo. It's a legal Gestapo. That's all I can say. What they're doing in the United States is they're sending these DOJ people around, these attorneys, to indict people for criminal indictments on things that are like very fringe, because the Donald says, go after him, go after Comey, you know, and they get dismissed. But in the meantime, these people go through hell trying to defend themselves. Okay, so what do we have in the United States right now as we're sitting? We have a non-independent DOJ. Seriously. So somewhere along the line, the U.S. has to maybe have a constitutional amendment to make sure that the Justice Department is independent from Congress, independent from the president, and independent from politics. As we sit today, that is not true. You know, you have to imagine if you gave me an army of attorneys with an unlimited budget to sue people. I didn't like Jacoby, so I say, go find something about Jacoby and sue him. Well, I don't know anything. Well, make something up then.
At least we have the late night guys. At least we have the late night guys to explain what's going on in a fun way. And we're 2 weeks away from losing Colbert. Colbert's show goes off the air, which will leave Fallon and Kimmel. I think are we down to just two late?
Yeah, they can get rid of them. I mean, I think the thing about Comey, he said 86-47 or something like that. Oh,
yeah.
He's
and I don't know. No, so I worked in bars for 25 years, and if you worked in a restaurant, in a bar, when you 86 somebody, it doesn't mean you kill them. It just means that you don't let them back in the bar either for the night or for the next couple months because they've been an asshole in your bar. If you're in a restaurant and you run out of salmon, then you 86 salmon, you put it on a blackboard and you tell customers, sorry, we're out of salmon. So does it mean you kill salmon? No.
Yeah. Yeah, just tell
Amazon was selling 86-46 shirts.
Are you seriously?
Yeah, I mean, so no, everybody has been using 86 and get the president out of office.
Nobody.
Right, but a criminal indictment? Would you criminally indict somebody who said that?
Nope, not at all.
No, I wouldn't either.
It also can't. So they did it now. So Alina Habba, the president's lawyer, was on The View yesterday saying it's an indictable offense that somebody said 86 her, and this guy has been criminally charged for death threats. What she didn't tell the viewing audience is that in addition to saying 86er, the guy said kill her, said she needs to face death. So the president's lawyer, is on TV lying about her own situation with regard to 86.
So you're saying that somebody from this administration or formerly from this administration went on TV and lied? Say it ain't so.
What a surprise.
I mean, man, I can't believe that.
Couldn't have. The government, the U.S. government wouldn't lie to you, would they? Hey, Steve,
lie to you and everything like that. Hey, by the way, we got Steve with us and everything. Steve, you're a member of the press as well. So what is your take? Because we're talking about the U.S. and Comey, but the article I was mentioning said that the press is under attack in 100 out of 180 countries. So it's not just the U.S., but it's the press in general. And now as a member of the press, what is your take on this? Because there was a study saying that we're under attack in the world. So yeah, know that you're now a member of the press as well, PBS as well as this network. So just your take on how the press is treated.
Well, I mean, first of all, I guess I must say after my post-election postmortem, and I've been kind of in a pretty just relaxed mode. So I'm finally back. So I've been kind of not watching the news, keeping up. I did want to say the correspondence dinner was unfortunate, and I haven't really been keeping up with Comey and that stuff. But the reality is, to answer your question, I think it's sad when the media is just put in a bucket that we're all bad people, when all we're doing is trying to report the news. Right. And I think the sensationalism the rush to news networks, which are driven by both parties, have really created a sense of lack of confidence that many Americans may have in the media. And I think it needs to be resolved by, everything now is breaking news, breaking news, breaking news. It used to be breaking news was every now and then. I would like to see the news networks get back to having, shows on CNN like Larry King, and even on conservative news shows. Maybe a format of the Sunday shows where we bring people in and give educated perspectives on both sides of the aisle so that we are informed. And I'll end with that. My favorite tirade is Jeff Daniels in the newsroom when he says, no, America is not a great country in the world. And he goes off all the reasons why. And then he goes, but we used to be. And then he talked about all the things we did as Americans. But he said we were informed. We had the right data, the right facts, and we were able to make decisions on our own. So that's why I think we're under attack. I think it's a circumstance of technology, the information out there, the ability to just discriminate fake news on any platform with no accountability from these social media companies. That's the reality.
No, that makes sense.
Let me bring this up before. For the first time since the 1940s, the national debt now exceeds 100% of the U.S. GDP.
Wow, that's incredible. Hey, Nick, along that same kind of lines and everything like that, I just want to go back to the media really quickly. And I know you got something to add, Jacoby, but just really quickly, on yesterday's online dinner party, which is a show that I do on Wednesdays, I did have one of the founders of satellite television. So he actually was there in the early stages of television with satellites and everything like that. So he was there talking, and we were talking about the early baseball games as well as the original moon landing and things along those lines. So y'all can go back and watch, because he was wanting to go back to the glory days of television, kind of like what Steve is saying as well, because he feels that there's a lot of people that have the bully pepper now, not just our president, but just people in general, so they can they're like a lot of citizen journalists and everything like that. So there is definitely increase, and they are on both the left and the right, and they're covering some of it truthful, some of it is made up and conspiracy stuff.
So what it is, I mean, Steve touched on exactly what it is. Everybody finds their echo chamber now.
Right.
And you find somebody to watch on your echo chamber, because you're not looking for the actual answers. You're looking for confirmation bias.
Right.
And that's what that echo chamber is. You have people like Tim Pool. Tim Pool is a big time YouTuber, has millions of followers on YouTube, TikTok, and all this other stuff. But he's a conspiracy guy. He's a conspiracy. He lies pretty much a lot. He's diehard into Trump. They put him in the press pool. The reason why they put him in the press pool is because he's an influencer and he has people following him. This administration
is Pool one of those guys who was getting some funding from Russia indirectly?
Yes, Tim Pool got about, I think it was like 300,000 something a month from Russia. Yeah, they got tons of money. A lot of the right-wing influencers.
We should start a conspiracy show and get 300,000 a month.
Yeah.
What do you think?
But that's what people watch a lot now, and that's why the quote unquote mainstream media isn't trusted. Even though when they talk about the quote unquote mainstream media, Fox is never included in that, because the term itself, the actual coining of the phrase itself, was essentially to basically dismiss the information that you got from a Walter Cronkite or anybody that you didn't want to believe in. So the mainstream media is lying. They're the people on the TV that are telling you all this stuff, which is untrue. It's just you don't like the facts. So you try and dismiss them and come up with a way to dismiss that. So you look for that confirmation bias because it's outside of the main. And I did my own research is another thing.
Own research.
Yep. So
I see that with the anti-vaxxers all the time.
Yep.
I did my own research. So I look at the bios of the anti-vax. They always work for the Jones consultants, or like it would be in my case, Palavita consultants. And I told my wife, I said, why is it none of these people work for their own company? They're unemployed. In other words, they don't have a job. But the thing is, they all say, I've done my own scientific research. What background do they have in science? I don't even think they took a biology class. Yet they think having vaccines is horrible for you. You know,
And that's where
Lord.
that's what RFK leads.
But Jacoby, you
RFK
can't argue with them because it's whack-a-mole. You hit one of them down, the next one pops up. There's millions of them. Literally, I'm not kidding. You're not going to be able to stop it. I mean, there are millions of these people you're describing, these conspiracy nuts and these anti-vaxxers and whatever they are, Trumpsters. You know, there are millions of mindless people in the United States.
The other part about the debating someone of that in that realm is that you're not debating them directly, because they keep not only moving the goalposts, but they bring up strawman arguments, they bring up red herrings, they bring up things that aren't even associated to say, hey, look at this. But we were talking about this one thing. No, but come over here, let's talk about this. So it becomes more a whack-a-mole when you're talking to them or trying to discuss. And then it becomes whack-a-mole as you're just described, Nick. Oh, well, let me bring my friend in. Your friend's going to say the same exact thing you just did.
Yeah, it's really impossible. I mean, it's impossible to effectuate change once they become a certain age. I think
speaking of effectuating change and everything like that,
and you can't change. Everybody says people can change. I don't think so.
Well, speaking of effectuating change and everything like that, and I want to hear from Steve on this one. Are we actually going to get away from coal? Because like I said, there were about 60 countries. The U.S. wasn't involved, but they are saying that they are now going to implement ways to get us out of fossil fuel, whether that's coal, whether that's gas, whether that's whatever. So
let me give a couple of numbers. We're down to 40,000 coal miners, down from a peak of, I think, almost 1 million coal miners in the 1930s. There's very little reason to keep the coal industry going. It's expensive, it's dirty, and you're not saving very many jobs. It's cheaper.
Coal basically sucks. Now, I'll tell you one thing interesting that they don't show in the travel guides. If you fly into Vienna Airport, which I did twice this week, you fly into and over wind farms. It scared the bejeebers out of me because these things are tall. I mean, they're huge windmills going around and around. So why would Austria put all these wind farms up? Because they have a lot of wind, and that's how they generate a lot of electricity. And same with Spain. Spain is almost energy independent. They're completely like off the grid. And France is moving that direction too. Europe is moving where they're using renewables, or they're completely independent from the oil and gas. Now, in the meantime, who's dependent on it? China, unfortunately for them, India, unfortunately for them, and a lot of other countries. But the U.S. is right now independent, but the question is for how long? And there's so many ways.
Let's talk about why Trump hates
before you move away from that. No, before you move away from that real quick, just to answer Mark's question directly, the U.S. is not getting away from coal. That's the sad reality. We can talk about the diversification that every other country's having. You said China, Nick. China is dependent upon oil, but they also have one of the largest solar farms out there. They're also diversifying. They're pushing nuclear fission. They're pushing nuclear fusion. They're doing stuff to diversify. So as much as we want to say oil is hurting China, China's diversifying. So they're not as bad off as we say based on the oil. But the U.S. is not getting away from coal. The U.S., this administration is pulling funding for wind farms. The U.S. administration just invested $600+ million to keep coal plants alive.
Ow!
So we are not getting away from coal because who are the backers of this administration? The oil industry, this fossil fuel industry has backed it.
Yeah, West Virginia. Sorry, that's where Steve grew up. But come on.
Oh yeah, exactly. And that hit. I gotta leave in a minute, but that hurt West Virginia a lot. A lot of Obama's unpopularity was the shutting down of the coal industry, and today West Virginia is the reddest state in the union, one of the reddest states. But I will say that I agree with Fareed Zakaria's point of what we need is an energy transition strategy. And what do you mean by energy transition? Is the reality is, particularly many liberal Democrats and progressives want to completely get away from fossil fuels, but we can't do that because the cost of those renewables and solars is going up or still relatively high. So you need a transition strategy where still some coal, conversion of coal to natural gas, even nuclear as an alternative form of energy, while you're looking at your renewable energies. Also looking at innovation. Bill Gates has an investment here in Cary that's actually now in Morrisville, taking carbon from the air and putting it in the ground, carbon capture technology called Sustion. Amazing stuff. But it's not going to happen overnight. But I think this Iran crisis is showing us that there needs to be some energy independence, because we can't depend only on the Middle East, and India is still depending on Russian oil. Other nations are depending on it. We're going to need Venezuela. We're going to need the Middle East, and we're going to need, to find our own sources here in the United States. With drilling and those kinds of things. Unfortunately,
let me tell why Trump hates. 20 years ago, Trump bought a golf course close to the coast of Scotland, and Scotland had put up a wind farm, 11 giant turbines right off the coast, and Trump spent hundreds of thousands of dollars fighting with the Scottish government because he thought the wind farm wrecked the views from his golf course. And it's as simple as that. Because of a golf dispute, Trump is scuttling wind energy in the U.S.
So I think, Steve, you're right that we need a transition. Hence the reason why I think the Democrat Party has pushed for that. Even some moderate Republicans have pushed for that. The problem is this administration isn't doing a transition. Biden actually was pushing for that in his policies. And that's where a lot of the technologies were with the fission technology, which I hate to say it, but that's what China is actually doing with their transition technologies. Hence the reason why they have the largest solar farm. They are looking into the nuclear fission and so on and so forth. Coal, yeah, we can't turn it off and just be done with it. But investing another $600 million into bringing back old coal is not a good idea. It's not going to be helpful to any market. And one of the things, and yes, what happened in Virginia with Barack Obama, and even when Hillary Clinton was trying to continue those kind of policies, what they didn't say in Virginia is the transition piece that we're talking about. And also the educational piece. That's a part that we always forget, is that these coal families, these coal mining families have been doing this for years and years upon years. But we need to figure out a way to transition them from being able to focus heavily on these coal mines to focus on, the new technologies that are out there, from building particular wind farms. How can we take a coal miner and get them to believe into building wind farm factories? How can we get a coal miner to believe in building a solar panel factory on the top of the mountain that you just chopped off? I mean, there's just other ways to do it, but we never really focus on those things because just as you said, we want to kill one thing without thinking about how to get to that thing. There are steps and ways. And yeah, we need that transition plan. And honestly, other countries are already doing that transition plan. We're just fighting because, again, the oil industry, that coal and oil industry, that whole fossil fuel industry has a lot of money. And they are blocking and lobbying a lot of things and advertising a lot of things. They know that the money is there, but they've also got to get their investments right so they can get that money that's going to be there. That's where the problem lies, is that that fossil fuel industry, because, again, the manipulation of the mind and seeing the stuff that you see on TV, being paid a paid scientist, that happens. They have their own group that goes out and tries to push back against the other scientists that are out there or science translators that are out there. Like when the BP spill happened, you had people going out there and trying to say this, things were not as bad as they were. No, they're still seeping oil at the bottom of the ocean based on what happened with the BP explosion.
You guys are gonna
no doubt about that. We get ready to
everybody today. Thank you.
Yeah, great show.
Tomorrow.
Yeah, appreciate you, Steve. Yep, see you tomorrow. Nick, what do you got coming up with VC Masters? So tell folks what we got there, and then
it looks like we have a special guest coming in, Mark. So Dr. Azar is going to bring a special guest in today for VC Masters. So we'll see what the special guest has to say, but that'll be coming up later on today.
All right.
And I guess we're at the hour, so we're going to be Take it off here.
Getting on out of here. We got other shows coming up, including Coco at 6 o'clock, and of course, World Politics later today. But right now, let's get on out of here.